Inside the Birds is back. What's going on, everybody? Geoff Mosher, Andrew DiCecco in the house, filling in for Adam Kaplan as Adam makes his way back from Mobile, Alabama. Andrew, I got back a little earlier than Adam, and I got to say, it didn't suck to be in 70-degree weather. It was pretty
Wow.
cool.
Well, you said it usually rains. It's usually colder, right?
Honestly, the last three times I've been there, it's been very nice, so I can't complain. It's been I don't know if you remember. No, you weren't. Last year, people got sunburned. They weren't expecting it to be as warm, so anybody sitting on one side of the stadium got the right side of their face sunburned. On the other side, they got the left side because it was unexpectedly hot. But this time around, it was warm, but not like blazing sun, so it was perfect.
Oh, good. I'm
And
glad the weather was good.
Yeah, yeah. Better than the quarterbacking, but that's a whole different
Mhm.
story. Listen, we're gonna eventually talk about the Senior Bowl. Me, Adam, you, I'm sure, we'll get a chance to go through some of the college guys, but we've got the Super Bowl here. We've got the Eagles versus the Chiefs, so far more pressing needs. It was great to get down there, catch up with some people around the league, but we turn the page right back to the Super Bowl. And of course, Inside the Birds big game coverage is presented by our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing. We're so excited to have Green Lawn Fertilizing on board to bring you guys all of the Birds coverage leading off to kickoff. And more on them in a little bit. So, Andrew, man, Eagles Chiefs, once again, you were there 2 years ago. You covered the
Mhm.
game. We were all there, but you stayed for the game. And I wanted to start off asking you about this because I've been thinking about this a lot. You've said this year's team, you believe, has sort of a camaraderie and a closeness that you haven't really seen in quite a while. And you've covered some other teams in the league before too. Um, how do you think it sort of compares to the team 2 years ago that lost the Super Bowl as far as being a close knit group?
I think they're even closer. I really do. And I think a lot of players that were on that team, Jeff, grew and as leaders and just having that worldly experience, going through, the ebbs and flows of a season. And you learn a lot about yourself. You learn how to handle things maybe differently. And I think that you see position groups hang out with one another. We also see offensive and defensive players connect. And I think that obviously is a byproduct of Nick Sirianni and his messaging, his core values. But I just think right now everything's clicking, offense, defense, and most importantly, right now I would say that sets them apart from maybe a team like the Kansas City Chiefs that makes them extra special would be that close knit nature that we talked about.
It's so funny when you look at this matchup, right? There are so many, and I'll ask you your opinion of this in a second. There's so many really positive attributes about this year's Eagles team. And I think some of the things like you're mentioning, even better than the one 2 years ago, which was an extraordinary team. But I feel like the Chiefs, in a sense, almost can say, well, I'll see you and raise you, right? They've got camaraderie and they've got the rings and they've beaten the Eagles. And, the Eagles have come back with a stronger roster. I think we all believe that this is maybe their best roster ever, even stronger than 2017.
No, it
Um,
is, yeah.
yeah, yeah. But the Chiefs,
Even Torrey Smith, he was on with Mike Missanelli, and he said the same thing.
right, right. So the Chiefs though have all of that, the rings, and they're another team that has gutted out almost every single win that they've got, and I think that that's forged them together. Plus, they've got some of the best leaders. Like you're looking for that one advantage where you say, outside of the 53 man comparing them, right? Where do the Eagles have the whole team of destiny thing? Like they like 2017, they
Mm-hmm.
lost Carson Wentz. They went to Nick Foles. They felt like a team of destiny. I predicted them to beat the Patriots. I was really happy for the Eagles and their fans that they finally did it and won. It just felt like nothing was going to derail them. I feel like this time around, every time I try to look for that nugget, I keep well, like the Chiefs are chasing some history here, man. They are on a mission not just win a Super Bowl, but become immortal, more immortal than they already
Sure.
are.
Right, but I would also say that the other side of things, perhaps I'm too close to it because I've covered the Eagles really from spring through the summer to this point right now.
Mhm.
I got to tell you, man, their confidence level is at an all-time high. There is a belief and there is a close-knit nature of this team, and Nick Sirianni is pressing all the right buttons, coupled with the fact that they have a imposing, physical, bully-style offensive line. Saquon Barkley over Miles Sanders is a tremendous upgrade in this game. He can break tackles, he can hit the home run, and then that defense. having a coach like Vic Fangio who can have a counterpunch when the offense is able to kind of, see your cards a little bit and figure out what you're looking to do. I just think across the board, the Eagles are far and away a better team than they were in 22. But I would also say, to counter your point, that the Chiefs are coming in hot, but so are the Eagles. The Eagles are a talented team, and they also have a ton of confidence right now.
All right. So given everything you just said, Andrew, because I have been on the fence trying to figure out where I'm going to go with this pick, right? And I don't know, nothing can change unless somebody gets hurt in practice between now and when they kick off next Sunday. My lean right now is the Eagles to win this game. But I can't get past sort of the fact that the Chiefs have handled every little bit of adversity. But that confidence that you're talking about, I saw that in the 2017 team that was up against a dynastic team that had already won, 5 Super Bowls under Brady there. So right now I'm sort of leaning Eagles by a slight margin, but not confident in it. Where are you at?
I like the Eagles in this game.
Mm-hmm.
For many of the reasons that you sort of just mentioned, but having seen this team grow and evolve really since the spring, and you see the relationships that are formed, you see Nick Sirianni grow as a head coach. He learned from his mistakes. You'd be hard pressed to find any of those egregious decisions. You'd have to probably look back to the Jacksonville game. He's coaching with a ton of confidence. His coaches and his players are playing with a ton of confidence. And I just think right now, and you see players being able to step up in critical moments. Oren Burks, whether it's Grant Calcaterra, Fred Johnson, Kenny Gainwell in some moments. Across the board, it kind of reminds me a little bit of 2017 where you're seeing different players step in with that next man up mentality. So, yeah, I like the Eagles in this game.
Well, I think just the discussion that you and I are having right now sort of cements in my mind what I really think about this game. And it was one of the headlines of a recent pod that I think it's going to be an epic game, just like the one 2 years ago, just like the 2017 game against the Patriots. I think it's going to be epic. I think it's going to be close. Those situations usually historically have favored the Chiefs, but it doesn't mean it's going to happen again. And I really do think it's going to be exciting. Listen, ITB is going to be well represented at the Super Bowl. All 3 of us will be there once again. We'll be doing stuff from Radio Row. Adam and I will come back, obviously, before the game. Andrew, you'll stay there. You'll cover the game. You'll bring all the sights and the sounds from the locker room, win or lose. That's what we do. And, of course, we'll have a lot of great stuff coming from Radio Row, and we'll announce a little bit more about what's going on in a very future podcast. I just wanted everybody to know that we'll be well represented once again at in New Orleans this time, site of the Super Bowl. And while we're on the subject of the midnight green, and we're speaking about things that are green, just want to let everybody know, if you're stressing about your lawn this spring, and I know people are, our friends over at Green Lawn Fertilizing can help. They are based right here in the Philadelphia area. These guys are the experts in this region's conditions. That includes PA, New Jersey, and Delaware. They know how tough that drought was last year, and they've created a custom blending approach that will help your lawn recover. Andrew, we all know nobody wants a repeat of last year where I joked to Adam, it was like we lived in Arizona. It was dry. There was no green lawns. There were brown lawns. It was just, there were the fires where I'm at in Jersey because of how bad the droughts were. It was really bad conditions, and a lot of lawns still yet to recover. And that's why you got to call our friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing, our great sponsors of this podcast. And if you sign up now, you'll get 10% off. And I'm told this is a very limited offer. So head to the link in our description box of this podcast or YouTube video, or just go to greenlawnfertilizing.com/insidethebirds to take advantage. Don't worry about your lawn. Worry about what's going to happen next Sunday if the Eagles and the Chiefs are tied and it's a 50-yard field goal and they trot Jake Elliott out there. I'm sure everybody will be stressed out about that, but do not stress out about your lawn, okay? Only Eagles football should you be having you stressed right now. Make sure you call Green Lawn Fertilizing today. All right, Andrew, in this podcast, the Eagles are going to start practice today, in fact, right? Nope, Thursday.
Today. Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Thursday's practice is at the link. Saturday's practice is at the link. Tomorrow, which is Friday, will be at NovaCare.
Right. Yes. No. Tomorrow is actually Saturday. Today, wait. I'm coming back from Mobile, man. I actually thought it was Monday when we started this podcast.
Oh boy,
this podcast comes out on Friday, right? Because we record this on Thursday night. So knowing that means what for practice?
today it'll be at NovaCare Complex.
Today at the NovaCare Complex. Yeah. All right, interesting. Now they're probably not going to go to the link, right? Why would you practice at the link? Because
they're at the link. They were at the link on Thursday, and they'll be at the link on Saturday.
Oh, they are. That's right. That was weird. I'm sorry. You're again jet lagged, so I'm forgetting things that I knew to talk about. I thought that was interesting that they were practicing at the link when they're about to play in the Super Bowl in an indoor stadium.
Did you find that a little bit? I don't know. I don't know what they practice for the NFC Championship game at the link. Maybe they're just continuing to get that field type of,
Yeah.
I don't know.
Well, it is easy. Well, I was going to say I can understand why they're not going inside to practice this week and like piping up crowd noise, because that surface has been brutal on knees, right?
Well, Slade is not like the indoor playing surface. So I think the link probably appeases a lot of folks, and they've had a lot of success. It's hard to argue that they've practiced there ahead of the Green Bay game, NFC title game, and now even the divisional round game as well. But that's I think they just kind of maybe like the stadium feel.
Must be so. All right, so we'll talk about the injury report. We will get into some of the transactions, some very interesting transactions, and then perhaps, Andrew, a pending or imminent transaction with the Eagles coaching staff once this game is done. We'll get into that as well. And then I want to ask you about some things that you'll be working on both this week and at the Super Bowl. So why don't we start off talking about the transaction? So two guys were activated into the 21-day practice window. One was tight end CJ Uzomah, coming off of injured reserve, and the other was Brandon Graham. And we heard the reports. We talked about this on the last podcast. Now, Andrew, Brandon, as you know, Torres, you were at the game. You were in LA covering that game for Inside the Birds when he tore his triceps against the Rams, probably having the best game of his season. I mean, he was an absolute game wrecker in that game. When you think about how November 24th doesn't seem that far away, I mean, just a little over 2 months, and that he's in the practice window here, right, trying to make it back. I think that just based on everything I've seen with triceps injuries before and comebacks and how long they take, I get that these guys are world-class athletes and that they recover differently. But I'm going on what I've seen other athletes have to do to come back from torn triceps. This would be unheard of for what I recall of torn triceps comebacks if he's able to play in the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I mean, normally you can speak on this. That's a season-ending injury. I think players that if they sustain it in September, they're usually gone for the rest of the season. But leave it up to Brandon Graham to gut it out. I know that he's been putting in a lot of work to make sure that he's ready for this moment if it were to happen. He's always optimistic. I think that's the one thing I always remember from him sharing that he tore his triceps, and his left tricep, by the way. In that game, he was just optimistic. He was smiling, and he said, I'm going to be around. I'm going to get this right, and we're going to see what happens. He was out there Thursday going through team stretches. That's about the extent of what we were able to see. He was a limited participant on Thursday. So, look, I think it's trending towards him trying to give it a go. Now, realistically, 8 to 10 snaps I think would be feasible. Obviously, pushing off and trying to do the deal with the block destruction and things like that are going to be challenging from his position. But I think that one thing about Brandon Graham, he uses leverage very well, and he's good at moving and dipping under and using the savviness to find ways to be effective. And he's also a highly effective run defender. And if he can give the Eagles 5 or more snaps, that's already more than what they're getting from Bryce Huff right now. So, and not to mention the other side of things, it would be a tremendous morale boost to a team that's already at an all-time high right now. To get one of their leaders, everybody loves Brandon Graham. To have him run out of the tunnel with them, I think that gives them the extra boost that I think is going to put them over the edge.
Yeah, listen, I get it too. If this truly is his last year, I suppose he could think about he may have had conversations with doctors like, what are my odds of coming back too soon, re-injuring, re-aggravating, and they say, yeah, you might not be ready, or you obviously have to get medical clearance to be able to do this. So, but it's also, it's also somewhat of the player's decision on certain things like pain tolerance and things like that. But I mean, I just think about the risk inherent with trying to come back from a surgery like this and a recovery like this so soon. But if it's his last game, and it's not like it's his brain, right? I mean, if he worries about getting hurt again, but then you just go through another rehab process while you're retired, then maybe it's worth it. But I'm more also curious, I guess, about just how impactful you can be without using your arm or not being able to use it. Now, I did, I'm sure you watched it too, the Penn State Notre Dame game, right? Abdul Carter was playing with a different kind of injury, but he's basically playing one-armed, and he dominated that game. So maybe to your point, the savviness of Brandon Graham can give you a 5 or 6 snaps, and maybe he just wants to be on the field. Like so this is where you get to the point where if you activate him, right,
someone's losing a spot,
right?
So let's not forget, there's the window's open for 3 players: Britton Covey, CJ Uzomah, and Brandon Graham.
Right.
I mean, somebody would have to move off of 53 to have any of those players available.
Yeah. Or 3 up to 3 people would have to be moved off.
Yeah.
All 3 of those guys.
Yeah, but Covey's window has been open for a couple of weeks and they haven't activated him. But for CJ Uzomah, he was a full participant today, by the way. EJ Jenkins has been doing just fine as the number 3 tight end. I think on special teams and as a blocker. I think about these things because that's just how my mind's wired. It would be a shame for a player to lose their spot on a Super Bowl roster because somebody else is now healthy and good to go. Well, we'll see. For Brandon Graham, I mean, that would be, that you make that move all day long if he's ready to go and he can help you.
Right. For Brandon and listen.
And there's also 3 offensive linemen every week that are inactive: Nick Gates, Darian Kennard, and Trevor Keegan. Right. I would have to think that Brandon Graham, he could find his way onto the roster potentially at maybe, if you're trying to split hairs here and look at where they could trim to get him on there. Mm-hmm. That would probably be the most logical.
Right. And correct me if I'm wrong, did Paris Campbell play any offensive snaps in any of the games?
That's another player. Yeah, I don't think he did. He played a couple on special teams, but I think for him, you can elevate him off the practice squad. The elevation is reset in the postseason anyway. And I think they may worry about a little bit of a depth concern because beyond the top 3, including Jahan Dotson, then you're looking at Johnny Wilson and Nia Smith. A lot of inexperience there. Paris Campbell has played, I think he started 47 games in his career. So it kind of gives him a little bit of a safety net.
There you go. All right. Well, obviously, Goddard had a really nice game, even with the ankle uncertainty against the Commanders. So he's good to go. And you've got we'll get into the tight end depth a little bit. We'll talk about the injuries in a second. But with Uzomah back in the practice window, obviously the team made a practice squad move. They released one of their tight ends that they had added to bolster some depth there, Nick Muse. And they signed running back Lou Nichols, a very familiar name. He comes back. He had been with the team before. Now, this is obviously with Kenny Gainwell, at the time of us recording this, not through the protocol, right? You're really down to Saquon Barkley, Will Shipley, and then Ty Davis-Price on the practice squad. Mm-hmm. So you got a week's worth of practice. You got to get through, these 3 or 2 left. And then next week, you're going to have some practices. The Chiefs have all different doors. You may have to show a little pony formation on your scout team, right? Because of what the Chiefs do. So you need another body there until Kenny Gainwell is going to come back.
Very good point. Yeah. And Lou Nichols obviously very well versed. Just to give a little bit more of a background, he was in training camp with the Philadelphia Eagles. Really impressed me in terms of his ability to develop as a pass protector. He's more of a between the tackles type of guy. But as we know, Geoff, from talking to folks at the Combine, he has a little bit of juice to his game as well. I think that's the quintessential practice player that can give you a multitude of looks. So it's an interesting signing, but one that it makes a lot of sense when you really think about it.
Absolutely. Now, what's really, I think, an interesting case for the Eagles, and look, Kenny Gainwell's an important player. He may not have to, he's not going to have like 13 to 15 touches, but you saw even in the check down that he had against the Commanders where he got them within, I think, really close to a first down. He makes important plays when he gets the ball, and a lot of times he's part of their 4-minute drill or 4-minute offense, right? He can catch the ball well.
I think he's the most underrated offensive player on the Eagles. I feel really comfortable with saying
underrated, that. Yes, but that's because almost everybody on the offense is like so highly rated, right? It'd be hard
Right,
to.
right. But you can make a case for Mekhi Becton compared
Good
to
point.
the accolades that his teammates get. I just think Kenny Gainwell is a good football player. He does a
Yeah.
lot of things well in pass protection. He's not the biggest guy, but he burrows forward for short yardage, and he catches the ball extremely well. I think he's their best pass catching running back, most natural.
Yeah, absolutely. He has done a nice job when called upon. So let's talk. The Eagles are leaving for New Orleans on
Sunday, and they should be there mid afternoon.
right Sunday. So here's where it becomes very interesting with the running backs, and Lou Nichols again adds to the practice squad. If Kenneth Gainwell has not cleared concussion protocol by Sunday, that means he cannot fly down. I would imagine.
Is that true?
Well, I mean, don't you can't get on a plane if you haven't cleared the.
I think it can. I think it can aggravate symptoms, but I don't think that it's prohibited.
Okay, you're right. You know what? I didn't mean if he doesn't clear. I think you have to advance to a certain stage through the protocol before you can do that. I don't think you can just get right on a plane if you're still not through stage one. Plus, even if you could, I'm not sure the Eagles would want to jeopardize that. So it'll just be interesting to see like where he is at in the protocol by then and whether he travels down or not. I wasn't saying he was going to get left behind for good because he could pass the next day and fly down on his own. We see players sometimes do that, have to fly in on their own into a game. But it was just from a practice standpoint, if he couldn't make it down, that's another reason why you really needed to bolster that position with him being out.
Yeah, and the whole team will be there anyway. They bring practice squad and the whole team for it is how it is for media night. So everybody will be there.
Everyone will be there. All right. Last thing on sort of transactions, Kellen Moore had his interview with the Saints, and he could be for the second straight year. The Eagles could have their offensive, well, not second straight year. I'm sorry, second straight Super Bowl season could wind up losing a coordinator to a head coaching job. It was Jonathan Gannon last time, and I tell you this: one thing I do not look forward to if the Eagles do not win is somehow blaming Kellen Moore being distracted by the Saints job, which is sort of low hanging fruit in my opinion on it. But I mean, look, that would be a pretty. Say what you want about Kellen Moore. I think people have had mixed reactions, but the idea of losing yet another offensive coordinator, and I'll add to that because sources have talked to us about this, just asking around, they would expect, from what we understand, that if Kellen Moore does get that head coaching job with the Saints, that he's probably going to take Doug Nussmeier with him, or he'll want to take Doug Nussmeier with him to be his offensive coordinator.
Well, yeah, that's his guy. He's followed him at different stops, so that's not surprising. But look, the Eagles are, I guess the Eagles are a victim of their own success because anytime you're winning, anytime in Kellen Moore's case, Jalen Hurts, I think he in many ways he's involved as a quarterback. The offense, look, it's not exactly what we were expecting, but it's still dynamic nonetheless. Anytime you're pulling the strings of a team that's in the Super Bowl, you're going to have a lot of eyes on you. You're going to have a spotlight. So as long as the Eagles are still successful, they're going to keep running into these issues. It's a good sign for coaches. That's going to make them want to come to Philadelphia. But if you're looking for continuity and you're built for sustained success, that's not exactly the best for the Eagles as an organization, I would imagine.
Right. But, and I hear a lot of people say, man, this is so, why can't Jalen Hurts get this continuity? He's always had different coordinators. But I think you're making the great point. You become a victim of your own success, and it's not unique to Jalen Hurts. I mean, Patrick Mahomes has played in the league for 7 years, right?
Yeah.
Is this the 7th year? Now, he hasn't had 7 different ones in 7 years, but he's had at least 3, and if not 4, right? He's had Nagy, he's had Bieniemy, and he's had Doug Peterson, right?
Oh, right. Kafka was his quarterback coach.
Right. So, and, there's good quarterbacks who are successful. This is what happens to them.
Especially if you're a young coordinator and you're going to get an opportunity. If everywhere you go, you have a track record of success, there's always going to be that intrigue there.
Absolutely. There will always be the intrigue. So we'll see. I mean, listen, I'm not like blind to the obvious here. It is extreme if you have to go to a new one every single year. That is very difficult. And it would be interesting to see, and we'll look into this as it goes along, but we're just talking about it because it's relevant now. It'd be interesting to see what direction the Eagles again would go in to look for a new offensive coordinator. It was made very clear that Nick Sirianni needed to bring in someone with fresher concepts than his own, and that's why they went out and got Kellen Moore. So you can look at the Eagles staff right now and say, well, this guy's been here, this guy's been here. But again, he and the organization made it clear that they wanted that outside fresh perspective. But at the end of this all, Andrew, they could look back and say, we brought in the outside fresh perspective, but it really didn't give us the result we thought we were getting. We thought we were going to get an even better and fresher passing game, but we wound up shifting into being a more run-heavy team. So I'm sure the organization will have to sort of reconcile all this in what they think of when they have to bring in their next offensive coordinator.
Yeah, and obviously we're getting a little bit ahead of ourselves here, but I would think that if an internal candidate would be Kevin Patullo.
We'll see. He was interestingly, that's why I made the point, like he's attached to Nick Sirianni, and when they weren't happy with the offense at the end of 2023, those guys, it wasn't like Patullo got the opportunity to replace Brian Johnson. They felt like they had to go to the outside. So it would be interesting to see how the organization felt about it this time around.
But like Nick Sirianni, perhaps he's grown or done some things behind the scenes that maybe appeals. But again, we'll have to wait and see how this all shakes out. But for internally, that would be the most obvious candidate.
Yes. We'll see how it shakes out. All right, let's pause for a quick moment here for a word from our great friends at Sky Motor Cars.
Sky Motor Cars in Westchester is a different sort of dealership. All it takes is one look at their Highline pre-owned vehicles that people all over the country want and need. Owner Brett Schiller, make sure you don't spend a dime of your money before you purchase the car. Sky Motor Cars allows you to make all the decisions regarding your next vehicle. At Sky Motor Cars, you never have to spend more than necessary. Visit SkyMotorCars.com today or call 610-918-7225.
And if you stop into Sky Motor Cars out there in Westchester, PA, make sure you tell them Adam and Geoff sent you. You will get a great deal, great customer service, great people to work with. We always thank Sky Motor Cars for their patronage, and we definitely suggest you visit them at SkyMotorCars.com if you can't make it in. I always say go in because you got great inventory, you got really friendly people. Brett Scholder and his staff are amazing. So check them out at Sky Motor Cars, SkyMotorCars.com. All right, why don't we go into this injury situation even more? And of course, the Eagles injuries are presented by our friends at Stretch Zone. Get our no obligation 30-minute free stretch at one of their 12 locations. So there's some concerns with the list, right, Andrew? There are a couple guys that popped out. I mean, we'll go through them all. We got, Saquon Barkley, rest. A.J. Brown, rest. Landon Dickerson, knee. No surprises there. Kenny Gainwell has the concussion. This is all the Thursday practice report. Dallas Goedert, rest/ankle. So clearly he's still on the report with the ankle injury, but at least we've seen that he's very productive dealing with it against the Commanders, and he's got more time before his next game. Cam Jurgens, we know at the back. Moro Ojomo popping on the list with the shoulder, right?
I spotted him right away, and I made note. I was like, that's curious, but
yeah, definitely. He actually played a little more than I thought he would. Maybe it just seemed that way in the game. I don't remember exactly how many snaps, but he definitely showed up in that game, even though you might not have heard his name very much. There was some show up by him.
Yeah, I talked about Kenny Gainwell being perhaps the most underrated Eagle. I think Moro Ojomo might be the most improved Eagle. Good one. Or definitely certainly a candidate for maybe unsung hero, because Nolan Smith might be most improved. But
absolutely. Eli Ricks has an illness. It feels like at least once a week there is one or two players, not just on the Eagles, but all around the league dealing with illness. And Nolan Smith is also dealing with an illness. So we know that Eli Ricks and Nolan Smith have been hanging out, right? No, I'm just kidding. And then Devontae Smith, this was the concern. Now he's still on the list with this hamstring injury. Those were all guys who did not practice Thursday. And obviously limited, as you mentioned, were Britton Covey with the neck, Brandon Graham, elbow, Brett Toth, full practice, and CJ Uzama, as you mentioned, full practice with the abdomen. So Smith has been on the injury report with a hamstring a little bit this year. So yeah. I'm not like overly concerned. Just I would have thought though, you get treatment on it, you loosen up. Like I'm a little surprised that you're still dealing with it, but I know that they can be tricky and linger a little bit.
Yeah, they can be fickle, and the Eagles have played in some really cold games. Sometimes they may aggravate it a little bit. He's not going to I mean, in all likelihood, it's not going to be something that it's going to hamper or hinder his progress throughout the next 10 days. But yeah, how hamstrings are. They just tend to be a little tricky sometimes.
I'm wrong. I'm sorry. I don't think Smith he's been on the injury report with something else, but this is the first time.
I thought it was a hamstring.
It is a hamstring, but I don't think he had a hamstring issue prior this year.
I thought that's what it was the whole time. I
thought it was the knee. I'd have to go back and look. I know Adam and I were talking about it, and he thought this was the first time that it was a hamstring, or maybe even the first time in quite a bit. So either way, when you're talking about wide receivers with hamstrings, it's always something that you're concerned about. Luckily, they have this time, but I imagine they'll be easy on him in practice until he's really ready to go.
Yeah, that's something obviously to keep an eye on. But I think right now, given how deep they are into the season, the Eagles have to be really happy with their state of health right now with their roster going into the biggest game of the season. I don't know that they could ask for much more, all things considered.
Right. Okay. Yeah. So this is what it is. Smith has had a hamstring injury this season. He's been on the report for it, but I don't think he was last week. So it's kind of the same thing, but it re-popped up. So to me, that's a signal that he just needs to get treatment on it at times. He's a wide receiver. He's constantly running. And I'm sure there are times, maybe even by the way his frame is, that it probably bugs him a little bit.
Yeah, probably. That's probably what it is. That'll get ironed out.
Where's your concern level with Landon Dickerson and Juergens? And look, they're going to play, unless barring they have some terrible setback or anything. They're going to play. But you watch the way Juergens could barely move as he was walking off the field. And while I will say he did a yeoman's job to go in there and replace Landon, I think that, having to play the Chiefs and a guy like Chris Jones and a full 4 quarters like that would be pretty difficult. And Spags would be taking aim at extra pressures, extra man pressures, making them go 5 wide in their protection or 5 out in their protection and try to put them on an island.
Yeah, those are the 2 players you don't want being injured at the same time. Obviously, ideally, if you're the Eagles, you don't want either player injured. But with the back injury, the best thing that they could possibly do is rest. Same thing with the knee. The Eagles have done a really good job this season in managing lingering issues with A.J. Brown with the knee, giving him rest, giving Josh Sweat rest throughout the season to make sure that he's preserved for the stretch run. Saquon Barkley as well. So I think that they'll manage this the right way and try and get them. The goal was always to get the player up to as close to full speed as possible get them to game day. I think they'll be okay. They're obviously it's going to be something that lingers possibly given the nature of their injuries, but I wouldn't expect either of them to be in jeopardy for playing.
Not in jeopardy or playing. Do you think that this is probably one of the bigger storylines going into the game is how impactful and effective they'll be able to be with their injuries?
I think that's fair. I think that's fair to say, but we'll have to see because 10 days, a lot can happen in 10 days. You're not necessarily going to get cured. And it's not Mr. Miyagi. It's going to be able to cure your back. But I think that just rest and going through the whole recovery and rehab process is going to be especially critical for both players. And I think that they will. They'll hit that hard. That, to me, is probably going to be their point of emphasis, not necessarily they didn't get practice reps. It's like trying to make sure they're taking care of their bodies off the field.
So now this goes back to the conversation we were having about the 53, because you accurately pointed out that Nick Gates is almost never – is he practice squad now or is he still –
No, he's on the 53. He's been on the 53.
He's just never active, right? And then Driscoll is still on IR, I believe, correct?
He's on IR.
All right. And then who's the other guy that's never active?
Keegan dressed for 1 game this season.
Right.
And Darian Kennard, I think, only dressed for 1 game this season.
Right. So depending on how these guys are, I don't know if the Eagles want to, for the second straight must-win game, take a chance on not having at least one more interior offensive lineman. They know they have Steen who can step in if one of those 2 guys get hurt. Specifically, if Dickerson gets hurt, they need a guard, right? So they know Steen can go in there. If Juergens has to come out.
Steen did a really nice job, by the way, on Sunday.
You thought so?
After he settled in.
That's what Greg Cosell said. He started off a little shaky, as you can imagine, in that situation, and then settled in as the game went on. And it was a tough situation because not only was he replacing the left guard spot, but the center that was working next to him was basically working on one leg.
That's what I mean.
Yeah.
When you assess the play, all that needs to be taken into consideration. I thought early on you saw the communication lapses, but he settled in the more reps that he got. And that's what he said after the game. And I thought that was apparent the more snaps that he was getting as the game wore on.
Yeah. And I don't know that the Eagles would activate one of those guys we just spoke about.
Yeah, I don't think so.
Because I don't think that they feel like they're better off having that body in there. I think that they feel like if they lose Dickerson or Juergens, you're putting Steen in. And if they lose another one, you're probably not winning. Like Nick Gates is not going to be the guy. No offense to Nick Gates, not going to be the guy that comes in there and saves you. Right? You're at that point you're swimming if you lose 2 offensive linemen.
Well, for what it's worth, Brett Toth can snap, he can play guard, and he can play tackle. Now, we can deliberate the degree of which he can play any of those positions, but I think that he also adds some versatility there in a pinch.
Right, and he was, again, a full participant in practice. All right, so you mentioned the stretch run. Well, guess what, Andrew? I'm someone who's going to be getting myself a stretch very soon. I'm going to be headed back to Stretch Zone. I go to the location in Cherry Hill. It's fantastic. I love them. And why am I going to get stretched in the next few days? Because before I get on that long flight to New Orleans, and by the way, I just got back from a flight from Mobile, which is not that far from New Orleans. I'm literally there. I'm at home, then Mobile, then home. By the way, I had to connect in Charlotte, so I was traveling all day and night. And now we're going back to New Orleans. So I'm absolutely going to need to get myself stretched out by the great people at Stretch Zone, where I've been going for a couple of months now. I love what they do for me there. They definitely get me, whether I'm going for a run, whether I'm about to get on this airplane in a couple of days. I just need a loose body, and it really helps to have my legs, my arms, my hamstrings especially. I don't know what you're like, Andrew. I know you did a lot of weightlifting in your day, but I am probably the least flexible person on earth in my hamstring area. So, and I run all the time, and I still have like no hamstring flexibility. But that's why I go to Stretch Zone. They really help me out.
Yeah, that was my Achilles heel always, my hamstring. And then no matter what I did, ice, heat, foam rolling it just never really jived with me for whatever reason. That was always the hardest thing. It was like an Oldsmobile in January trying to get that thing going.
That's great. By the way, I love the fact that you just said that your Achilles heel was your hamstring.
Yeah. It's like I write or something.
Yeah, right. So, all right, make sure you check out this great deal at Stretch Zone. Go to StretchZone.com. Get the no obligation 30-minute free stretch at one of their 12 locations. All right, as we close out here, Andrew, 2 things I got for you. One, the Eagles and Chiefs, as far as the odds makers are concerned, our friends at DraftKings have the the Chiefs as 1.5-point favorites. I think that's pretty fair. It's weird, and I made this point last week when I did my NFL preview show. Last week, before the conference championship games, the Eagles were the odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl at that time. They were like plus 225. The Chiefs and Bills were plus, I think, 450. And what I said was, that doesn't mean they think the Eagles are going to win the Super Bowl. It just means they think the Eagles are definitely going to be in it and having it, because the Bills had to play the Chiefs and it felt like a toss-up game. In fact, the Chiefs were 1.5-point favorites in that. So there was more of a guarantee of the Eagles being in the Super Bowl. And I said if the Chiefs won that game, it would probably swing back to the Chiefs. And that's how it looks. The Chiefs are 1.5-point favorites. How would you place it if you were an odds maker?
Yeah, probably right about that. The Chiefs have been in this game. There's some continuity there with obviously Reed and Mahomes and Spagnuolo. I think that kind of makes sense because you're going to give them the slight advantage, but it's not so much so that they're discounting the Eagles. And the Eagles are coming into this game with a ton of momentum, a ton of confidence, and a monster win in the NFC title game that I think they're going to use that as a springboard into what I'm expecting to be a really strong showing next Sunday.
Going to be an epic game. I really do believe it's going to be I'd be very, very surprised if this game wasn't both exciting. Although, I did mention on the pod with Adam that because both of these teams are not explosive like they were years ago, that they're more sort of meticulous and deliberate with how they move the ball. It may not be exciting from the ball's in the air and all these trick plays and stuff like that. It's just going to be kind of like in my opinion, a well-played methodical game between 2 offenses that have seen pretty much everything and know how to move the ball against any kind of defense. So I don't think it's going to be sloppy. I don't think there'll be a lot of turnovers. Hopefully there'll be no paint causing everybody to fall all over the field. So I think it'll be a clean played game from that point. But I think it'll be exciting because I do think it'll have a little bit of a neck and neck type of tone to it. And I'd be surprised if this thing I know the Eagles had a 10-point lead in the last game and the Chiefs bridged that gap. I think I'd be surprised if anybody had more than a 10-point lead at any time. How do you feel about that?
I think this could be a game where Kellen Moore kind of flexes his muscle a little bit and really gets into his bag of tricks, because the Eagles, they have players that can be explosive. Jalen Hurts has proven it before. Jalen Hurts threw, I believe it was a 45-yard, 39-yard, or 45-yard touchdown in the Super Bowl to A.J. Brown.
Sure.
Yeah, I mean, like, they have players that are capable of doing that, which suggests to me that I think eventually Saquon Barkley could just rip off a 60-yard run in the NFC title game. So there are explosive plays that this team's equipped to do, versus someone like an Isaiah Pacheco, who's more of a grinder, between the tackles grinder for them.
Right.
Kadarius Toney hasn't been their vertical guy. He's been more of a short to intermediate type of guy, which is really surprising to me.
Wait, he's still on the team? Tony? Did you mean
I'm sorry.
Tony?
I'm not Tony.
Xavier Worthy, right?
Xavier Worthy.
Okay, cool.
yeah. Xavier Worthy. Look at that, man. It's been a long season.
I'm with you. I am with you, brother.
Travis Kelce's, he doesn't have that explosive vertical element. He's very effective in finding the soft spots, and he can be effective after the catch, but they don't have that explosive element that the Eagles do.
I think they are like the third lowest explosive rate team in the NFL, or maybe they might be the lowest. Actually, you're right. They have not figured out a way to use that speed of Xavier Worthy to translate into big plays. They're using him more now, and they're getting him in space, but they really haven't been able to go over the top. I imagine that's how teams defend them as well, and have forced them to be that way. And probably same thing with the Eagles at times.
Worthy's going to have to be a player that they key in on, obviously, because he can take the top off of the defense at any given moment. And if you start to play a little bit up and you're not really respecting that speed, which I don't expect the Eagles to do, that's where Patrick Mahomes can make you pay.
All right, what's coming up on InsideTheBirds.com and Daily DiCecco and all the great things?
Well, we got Daily DiCecco that I'm going to be carrying through Super Bowl week, so about 10 to 15 minutes, updating you, the audience, as to whatever I've been able to glean from my days with the Eagles at the NovaCare Complex, or even covering them at the Super Bowl. So you can look forward to that. I'll have all kinds of stories on InsideTheBirds.com. Rookie Diary with Will Shipley. Don't miss that this week, because he had a monster game. Me and him we already spoke after the game. We can't wait to chop it up this week and give you all the sights and sounds and what he was going through his mind when he scored his first NFL touchdown. Inside the Locker Room, I'll have that as well. Podcast form on the platform. So keep an eye on it. We got everything.
All right, great stuff. Can't wait till we're all down in New Orleans next week, providing even more content and coverage on Inside the Birds. That's going to do it for this episode of Inside the Birds, again presented by our great friends at Green Lawn Fertilizing. For Andrew DiCecco, I'm Geoff Mosher. Thanks for flying with us Inside the Birds. Be sure to check out our friends at PHLSportsNation.com. They're enhancing the fans' experience with their coverage of all Philadelphia sports teams. For the fan, by the fan is their motto. So make sure you check them out at PHLSportsNation.com and on Twitter at PHLSportsNation.